Yeah, our speaker today is Dr. Paul Kengor. He's a professor at Grove City College in Pennsylvania, and he's the author of several books. And if you want to read more of his bio, it's on page 21 in your booklet. So give a warm welcome to Dr. Paul Kengor.
All right, got it. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you, Father Glenn, Seth, everybody for inviting me. This is really great. I just love this, and I think I'd like to come every October hereafter. I mean that sincerely. This is bring my family with me. The one issue is I teach at Grove City College in Grove City, Pennsylvania, and our homecoming is usually about this time. In fact, our homecoming is today. And so it's something I'm usually expected to do, and the homecoming parade's a bunch of fun. So it's hard to work out the timing, but it's really encouraging to see this. My own Fatima story. I was a Protestant, evangelical, and I was teaching my specialty, which is communism, the Cold War. Ronald Reagan, Pope John Paul II, Margaret Thatcher, Lech Walesa, Mikhail Gorbachev, who just died, all these different figures. And I came upon one day the story of Fatima. And I heard about these predictions from this woman, right, the Blessed Mother, allegedly, and through these three children in Portugal, talking about the evil and errors of communism. A word they didn't even know what that was, right? Bolshevism. I mean, imagine an 8-9-year-old little kid, farm kid from Portugal, right, saying words like Bolshevism and communism. It's the kind of thing they can't make up, right? And the first time that I heard about it and I heard the predictions, I was just blown away. I said, this has just got to be accurate. All these different witnesses, what the kids were claiming. I remember talking to Scott Hahn about this, and he's Scott and I are really good friends. We've lived parallel lives. We both went to Grove City College and converted, became Catholics at Grove City College. In fact, my son, who just finished his master's degree at Franciscan University in Steubenville, lived with Scott last year, Scott and his family. But I remember talking to Scott about this, and Scott was really anti-Catholic. I mean, when he was at Grove City College, he would have been the guy with a torch, right? Chasing the Catholics off campus, right? Screaming at them. I mean, I was never that. In fact, I'm actually a revert. I had been raised Catholic, but Scott just hated Catholics. And I talked to him about Fatima, and he said, I'll never forget. He said, Kimberly, his wife, was giving birth, and this thing came up on the TV in one of the religious channels about Fatima. And he said, keep in mind, he said, I'm totally anti-Catholic. And I watched this, and he said, I couldn't take my eyes off it. I was just fixated. I was fascinated by it. And so his reaction was much the same as mine. So it began for me this lifelong interest in Fatima that eventually led to books and other subjects and talks like this. So glad to be here. I got to say one other thing too. I'm an editor for the American Spectator, which is a magazine that was founded in Bloomington, Indiana in 1967 by R.M. Terrell Jr. The original name of the original American Spectator was created by a guy named George Gene Nathan, who's from Fort Wayne. Anyone know about him or where he's from or anything? No? All right. So I'm kind of throwing that out for information. He founded the American Mercury with H.L. Mencken. He was a fascinating figure, New York intellectual. And when he died, converted to Catholicism. It's a great story. And he's from Fort Wayne. And so if anybody here has any information on that, let me know. I'm going to get the information back to the American Spectator people. All right, we're here to talk not about George G. Nathan, but this, Fatima. So Fatima's warnings fulfilled, the evils and errors of communism. This is kind of a primer, if you will, on what communists believe, where this came from. And the original book was published in 1848, the Communist Manifesto, written by who? Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. It's going to be a test on this when we're finished, all right? So, So it's published in 1848, and the book opens with this phrase: a specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. They describe communism as a specter, right? A ghost, a spirit. And then they said in the next line, they said, all the old forces of Europe are allying together to exorcise this specter, right? Not EXER, like running on a treadmill, right? But like an exorcism of a demon. And they even said, leading the charge on this, the Pope, the Tsar, Metternich, all these other figures. So right away, 1848, these guys, Marx and Engels, throughout their books and their writings, they mock religion over and over again. In fact, there's a letter from Engels to Marx when they're working on the Manifesto. And Engels says to Marx, give a little more thought to the catechetical form of our book. I think instead of calling it our Communist Confession of Faith, we should call it just the Manifesto. So they originally used words like catechism and confession of faith. So they always, all the time, were mindful of and mocking religion, aping religion. They say in the beginning of the Manifesto, the theory of the communists may be summed up in a single sentence. Okay, so if anybody asks you, how do you define communism? Say, well, Marx and Engels, the founder in the Communist Manifesto, said 4 words: abolition of private property. Abolition of private property. Now, the church, New Testament, Old Testament, from the cave to the courthouse, private property has been sacrosanct. I mean, the right to own property. The 10 Commandments, right? One of the 10 Commandments is thou shalt not steal. People have a right to have property. These guys, the very heart of their program is to abolish private property. So right then and there, and they say, you are horrified or intending to do away with private property? Well, that's not what we really mean. No, they said that is exactly what we intend to do. Eliminate your private property. Now, there's a lot of young people around here. I have kids. I have 8 kids. My 10-year-old daughter, Gianna Maria, could tell you, Daddy, if they try to eliminate private property, they're going to have to kill 100 million people. I mean, that's a non-starter. You try to take away people's private property, you're going to have a bloody war on your hands. And they knew it. They knew how radical this was. So Marx, Engels, Lenin, socialism, communism, all of this is a question I get asked too. What's the difference between socialism and communism? Marx and Engels and Lenin and the Bolsheviks all said that communism is the final transitionary step in this process where you go from slavery to feudalism to capitalism to socialism to communism. So socialism is just the final transitionary step to communism. And a lot of young people in America today are saying, well, I don't believe in communism, I'm a socialist. Or I'm a democratic socialist, because they think that that's better. But these guys would say, well, great, you're on your way then, right? You're on your way to full communism. Their slogan, workers of the world unite. That's what Marx and Engels wrote in the close of their book. And Marx acknowledged that his views on property stood contrary to the political order of things. So if you said to these guys, abolishing private property, don't you get how radical this is? They got it. They knew. They knew this was a really, really big deal. They said communism seeks to abolish the present state of things. It's a very revolutionary philosophy. This is what our church understood. This is apparently what a lady in Fatima understood, right? This isn't just about sharing or spreading the wealth or redistributing some income, right? They wanted to abolish the present state of things, a very radical system. The communists everywhere, they said at the end of the manifesto, support every revolutionary movement against the existing social political order of things. Right? Every political movement against the existing social political order of things. And look at that bottom quote. The communists tell you that their ends can be achieved only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Think about that. That's really, really radical. I mean, the Democrats and Republicans, they have certain ideas about tax rates and healthcare and so forth, right? These guys called for the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. They weren't just tinkerers, right? They changed this and changed that. Oh, that's really bad. We need to change this, but we'll keep that. They want to forcibly overthrow everything. It's like pure nihilism. A very totalitarian, radical ideology. They hated religious education. They hated home education. At the close of the manifesto, in the manifesto, they said, "You seek us with charging, with parents wanting to stop the exploitation of children by their parents. To this crime, we plead guilty. But you will say, we destroy the most hallowed of relations when we replace home education by social." There's a 10-point plan in the Communist Manifesto. Point 10, so number one is abolition of property and land and so forth. 2, establishment of a progressive or graduated income tax. 3, abolition of all right of inheritance. By the way, go to the millennial at Starbucks with a little Marx sticker on the back of the laptop and say, how about if we abolish all of your right to inherit your parents' private property? You like that? You want to do that? Abolition of all right of private property. But point 10, free education for all children in public schools. They wanted to ban, and they sought to ban, all religious schooling, all homeschooling, and turn it all over to the secular communist state and the states government schools. Marx protested against what he called the disgusting bourgeois claptrap about the family and the hallowed correlation between parent and child. By the way, our church will tell you, right, that the relationship between parent and child is hallowed. It is special. And the home is the first place of education. But the Communist Manifesto goes after that. Young people say to me all the time when I speak around the country, "Oh, the Communist Manifesto is a pretty good book if you just read it. Yeah, it talks about sharing." And I say, "Oh yeah, have you read it? It doesn't just talk about sharing wealth. It talks about things like abolishing home education, abolishing the hallowed relationship between parent and child." This is what worried the church about this ideology. These guys also hated religion. They hated the idea of moral absolutes. Marx called religion the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, the soul of soulless conditions. Religion is, said Marx, what? The opiate of the masses. Opiate of the masses. Heart of a heartless world. Soul of soulless conditions. Marx said communism begins where atheism begins. That was one of Fulton Sheen's favorite quotes about Marxism. And I'm running into people all the time now who call themselves Christian communists. These guys would tell me, "You're out of your mind." And Marx would have said, "Don't you understand? Communism begins where atheism begins. You can't be a Christian and a communist. The two are incompatible. What are you talking about?" Christian socialists, I run into these people. If you want to help the poor, just do the gospel. Do what Jesus would do, right? You got your book, the Bible. You don't need to go to the manifesto written by these two angry atheists who didn't believe in religion. Just why would you want to do that? Vladimir Lenin, all worship of a divinity is a necrophilia. Y'all know what that is? All right, there's kids in the audience. We won't describe what that is. There is nothing more abominable than religion. There is nothing more abominable than religion. Marxism, communism seeks the most radical rupture with traditional relations and traditional ideas. The most radical rupture. They were radicals, revolutionaries. Did you know that this was in the manifesto? By the way, that quote at the top is a letter from Marx to Engels. Marx wrote, "Blessed is he who has no family." Marx had a bunch of kids. Father Glenn and I were talking about this. Two of Marx's daughters committed suicide in suicide pacts with their husbands. Marx was just a terrible father, terrible home relations, just awful. The Communist Manifesto actually says, hold on, I can't see this. Abolition of the family. Abolition of the family. Even the most radical flare up at this infamous proposal of the communists. They wrote that in 1848. Abolition of the family, what's that doing in there? I thought this was about sharing stuff. Revolutionary philosophy. All right, so it takes hold in 1917. October 1917, about 13 days after the final apparition at Fatima, which was on October 13th, 1917, the miracle of the sun. After all these days, these 13s in 1917, right? That's when the revolution breaks out, of all things. So almost 70 years after the publication of the Manifesto. And right after Our Lady of Fatima had issued all these warnings, these guys take over. Who are they? Quiz. Guy on the left. Stalin, Lenin, and Trotsky. That was the troika. So the revolution, 1917, they have a civil war in Russia from 1918 to 21. Our Lady said, right, they will spread their evil and errors around the world from Bolshevism. 1918 to 21, the civil war between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, 7 million men, women, and children died in that civil war. By the way, give you an idea of the numbers here. 7 million dead, 1918 to 21. How many Americans did we lose in World War II? About 400,000. So imagine losing 7 million of your own people in the Civil War during that period. And that follows World War I, where no country lost as many people in World War I as Russia. And then Russia was on the winning side in World War I, but the Bolsheviks pulled them out. So they didn't even get the fruits of that victory. And this is just the start of an incredible amount of death. Communism goes global because they said, Marx and Engels said, workers of the world unite. Got a bunch of different quotes there. By the way, if anybody wants any of these quotes, let me know. I'd be happy to share this presentation with you. Seth can email it to you. He's got a copy of it. If you want to take pictures of any of those quotes or whatever, go. Any of you college students, you might need this stuff, especially if your professor's saying, yeah, communism's a great idea. I'll tell you, the people of Russia just really wanted this. But they said right away that their task was not to have communism in one country, but to spread it around the world. That was the goal. Workers of the world unite. We have a world to win, is what Marx and Engels said. Lenin said, our victory will be a lasting victory, not just when we conquer one country, but when we conquer the whole world, because we launched the revolution exclusively counting on world revolution. This is one of the biggest problems with it, by the way, and this is why it was such a big deal to America, the United States, and Our Lady of Fatima. They weren't content with just wrecking one country. They wanted this to go global. And to this day, that's the dream. That's the vision. They're not happy until everybody is under communist rule. In fact, I remember talking to a group of communists at a college about 20 years ago, and they said, yeah, the problem is the capitalists always beat us out wherever we go. You know, it's more efficient. It produces more prosperity. People like it more. And I said, well, then what are you still clinging to this for? They said, well, that's our goal. It's our vision. We want the whole world to be communist. Like, give it up, man. Come on. Let people be free to choose on this. March 1919, the start of the Soviet Comintern, Lenin said, the existence of the Soviet Republic side by side with the other states after a period is unthinkable. In the end, either one or the other will conquer. The idea of coexistence between the Soviet Republic and the bourgeois states is unthinkable, unacceptable. And so they launched something called the Soviet Comintern, which stood for Communist International. And the Comintern, as Trotsky said, this would be the general staff of the world revolution. So this is where the tentacles, the errors, the evils that Our Lady spoke of really start to spread. They create this Comintern in March 1919 in Moscow. This would be the global headquarters of the world revolution. Every country would have one or two representatives or liaisons to the Comintern. And then the Comintern would have one or two people back in each country. Every country was allowed to have just one communist party. And that party would report to Moscow. So Moscow, the Comintern, was like the director of this global communist symphony. It was all going to be run from there. Any countries that had two communist parties, these guys immediately cracked down on them, said, no, 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 get your stuff together. You are one. You are one party that reports to us. So the United States, we got ours in September 1919. Which city, anyone know? Chicago. Started in Chicago. I've seen the Communist Party archives on Comintern archives and Communist Party USA at the Library of Congress. The very first document is September 1st, 1919, 1219 Blue Island Avenue in Chicago. Charles Ruthenberg, the founder of the party, who today is buried in the wall of the Kremlin. That's where his body is. And he's reporting to Moscow, we've done it, we've done it. We've created the Communist Party. We're ready to go. We're all set. We're all ready to go. Eventually it moved to New York. At one point in the 1950s, the Communist Party in the USA, half of all members lived in New York City, in the 5 boroughs. So New York has long been kind of the headquarters of American communism, but it started in Chicago. The Communist International has declared war on the entire bourgeois world. That's how Grigory Zinoviev, the original head of the Comintern, described it. They immediately started launching revolutions in Poland, Hungary, Bavaria. In fact, I could talk for hours about this, but 1920, they attacked Poland, which was the year that a guy by the name of Karol Wojtyła was born. And his father fought in that war. And the Poles, in the miracle of the Vistula, which they credited to the intercession of the Blessed Mother, defeated the Bolsheviks, keeping communism out of Europe at that point about 30 years earlier than it came in. And Lenin blew his stack, popped a cork, and just lost his mind. Hated Poland over this. I'm going to get those Poles. I'm going to get those Poles. So in the United States, they established Communist Party USA, which still exists. www.cpusa.org. Check their website anytime. They published People's World, which is the successor to the Daily Worker. Still exists. They swore a loyalty oath in 1935. I swear at all times to rally the masses to defend the Soviet Union, right? The only party that ensures a triumph of Soviet power in the United States. My friend Herb Romerstein said they were loyal Soviet patriots. They swore a loyalty oath, American Communist Party members, to the Soviet Union. That was their party. That was their flag. Langston Hughes. You have to read Langston Hughes now in all the public schools as a civil rights hero. They don't have you read this. Put one more S in the USA. When we take it over, it will be the USSA. They wanted an American Soviet Republic, as they called it. All right, so let's get to the meat here. How many people did this affect? How many people did it kill? The church predicted that this would be deadly. Our Lady predicted this was going to be, right, very, very damaging. This is the Black Book of Communism, published by Harvard University Press in 1999. It estimated that communist governments between 1917 and the late 1990s killed over 100 million people worldwide. Over 100 million people. The bloodiest, most destructive ideology in human history. There's nothing even close. And these numbers, by the way, who's that guy? Lenin today. That's Lenin today in his tomb. They have to wax him periodically. His body gets jaundiced, but he's enshrined there like a saint. Body preserved, Lenin's shrine. So 100 million dead. The Black Book of Communism actually lists only 20 million dead for the Soviet Union. We think the number is probably way higher than that. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Alexander Yakovlev, others said it could be as high as 60 to 70 million. Stalin alone might have killed 60 to 70 million. Which country killed more than any other? China. And by the way, but these numbers don't even include abortion. And what these two countries did, this is unbelievable. So abortion was first legalized in the Soviet Union in 1920. 1920, right? That's 50 some years before Roe v. Wade in the United States. By 1936, there were so many abortions in Russia that Stalin made it illegal. He said, we're not going to have a country left. And Trotsky reprimanded him. He said, you can't be a good communist and ban abortion. We have to have abortion. So they brought it back under Khrushchev in 1955. By the 1970s in the Soviet Union, what was America's worst year for abortion? Total numbers. Anyone know how many abortions a year? About 1 million, 1.5, 1.8 million. In the Soviet Union in the 1970s, they were averaging 7 to 8 million abortions per year. They've had hundreds of millions of abortions in the Soviet Union. And only Lord knows how many China has had. So these numbers don't even include that. China, 65 million. You add all this up, it comes up to 100 million. But again, the numbers are probably way higher than that. Martin Malia, the Berkeley professor, called communism the most colossal case of political carnage in history. Those are some more numbers. Oh, sense of comparison. You have to take all the people dead in World War I and World War II for all countries, add them together, and then double them. And then you're getting close to the number of people killed by communism. All right. Sorry if that's a little grim. All right. Here's the good news. Your church was way out ahead on this issue, unlike any other. And as a Protestant, when I saw that, I was just blown away at what the church knew. And long before Our Lady of Fatima spoke out. All right, how far back? 1846 was one of the first encyclicals, Qui Pluribus, by Pope Pius IX. All right, more quiz stuff. How long did Pope Pius IX serve as Pope? Anyone know? 1846 to 1878. Longest ever, other than our first Pope, Peter, right? Then he's followed 1878 to 1903 by, you guys know this Pope, Leo XIII, right? The Rerum Novarum Pope. But 1846, when was the Communist Manifesto published? Come on, you're taking notes. 1848. He's predicting the damage that's going to be caused by communism 2 years before the manifesto was even published. How did they know that? How did they know that? We believe that there's this magisterium through which the church, the Holy Spirit inspires it, speaks to the Pope. I remember seeing that as a Protestant. I thought, Catholics have got to be right on this. I mean, this is like the guy had a crystal ball. So Pius IX said in 1846, Qui Pluribus, communism stands absolutely contrary to the natural law itself. It would destroy the rights of property, right? Rights, even society itself. What's the next one? Pius the ninth, right? Called both socialism and communism, right? Pernicious, perverted theories, pernicious fiction. Leo the 13th, 1878. And so in these cases too, these popes in their first years of very, very long pontificates. Among the first things that they're doing is condemning communism. It's not like they did this 10 years into their papacy, right away. And long before the Bolsheviks even came into power. In fact, think about this. Lenin and Stalin weren't even born yet. Qui pluribus, Pope Pius IX, 1846 encyclical. Communism, the design, right? Wolves in sheep's clothing. Well, inwardly, people caused people to flee. Somebody read that, I can't read it. Even the practice of religion. They go after the practice of religion. Practice the widespread, disgusting infection. They are filled with deceit and cunning. These pestilential doctrines, everywhere depraved, right? And the imprudent, causing great losses for religion. By the way, that's a big part of this. We were talking, right, Father Len, the imprudent, the people who simply aren't prudent. And I run into this all the time with certain Christians who are just easily kind of duped by these ideas. But Marx talked about sharing. So what? Everybody knows it's good to share, right? But look at all the other stuff he taught. You don't need, read it all right? You don't need to be brought into that. They even talked about how marriage would be infringed. The sacred rights of marriage and family. 1846. Before Marx in 1848 talked about abolition of the family. There's Pope Leo the 13th, 1878 to 1903. Christmas Day, 1878, wrote the encyclical on socialism. And look at this phrase right here. This is really powerful. It talks about a wicked conspiracy between socialists, communists, nihilists, a wicked confederacy. So he is condemning, and I would point this out, Rerum Novarum is, which he did, is a favorite, Leo the 13th is a favorite among social justice Catholics, liberal Catholics, many of which talk about what they call Christian socialism. And he's saying, no, socialism is bad. Communism is bad. These are all part of a wicked confederacy. The church condemned all of that. American Magazine, in the summer of 2019, published a piece called The Catholic Case for Communism, the Jesuit magazine. I mean, the Catholic case for communism. There is no Catholic case for communism. And what are they going to publish next? The Catholic case for atheism? Here's Pope Pius XI, Quadragesimo Anno, May 1931. All right, you might want to get your phones out. You might want to share this one with Sister Social Justice. All right, look at what this says. Religious socialism, Christian socialism are contradictory terms. No one can be at the same time a good Catholic and a socialist, right? They are contradictory terms. There's no such thing as a socialist Catholic, a communist Catholic. If that person is claiming to be that, well, to quote Ronald Reagan, well, they're just very confused, right? Very, very confused. Divini Redemptoris, March 1937. This one's the best of all of them, by Pope Pius XI, on atheistic communism. Called communism a godless perversity, a satanic scourge. This is the phrase, look at this one on the bottom. The evil that we must combat, right, is an evil of the spiritual order. The emanations of communist logic flow with monstrous emanations with satanic logic. So the church is saying that communism is literally satanic, not just bad or wrong or imprudent or misguided. It's satanic. It's from the pit of hell. And there's publications like American Magazine publishing articles called The Catholic Case for Communism. Vatican II did several unpublished condemnations of communism. They were actually quite good. The really sad thing is they were never published. I'm going to skip through that. Here's St. Pope John the 23rd, who is a favorite among a lot of liberal Catholics. He too condemned communism. They all did. They all did, right? Socialism. He does not take any account of the, what is it? Objective order other than material well-being. There you go. It places too severe a restraint on human liberty. All right, this is my book, A Pope and a President. So defeating Soviet communism, moving forward here in the chronology of how this came about. Here's the big game changer. October 16th, 1978. This man, Kirill Wojtyla, is chosen by the conclave, the College of Cardinals in the Sistine Chapel, to serve as the next pope. Previous pope, John Paul I, served how long? Anyone know? 33 days. 33 days. That was it. So here, there had been nothing but Italian popes for 455 years. It's like twice the life of the United States. And now they get together in the heart of the Cold War, late 1970s, and they pluck a pope out of the heart of the communist empire, out of Poland, right? The miracle of Vistula, 1920, a country totally dedicated to Our Lady. This pope, totus tuus, right? Totally yours, Marian, this Marian pope. They take him out of Poland. He's shocked. He can't believe it. The pope is supposed to be Italian, right? Polish? First Slavic pope ever. He goes to Poland for his first trip. They asked him, Holy Father, where would you like to go for your first trip? Poland. Oh, well, that would be, no, sir, that'd be very undiplomatic. I mean, that would just really make the communists upset. You know, Moscow would need Poland. We're going to Poland. We're going to Poland. So he goes there for 9 days, June 2nd through 11th, 1979. Big crowds, 5-10 million people. Father, how do you like to serve the Eucharist there? Right? I mean, you'd be there all week, handing out. And he said there too, there can be no just Europe without the independence of Poland marked on the map, which is the one thing that he wasn't supposed to say. Nothing like that. All these different secret police with AK-47s surrounded. The people start chanting, "We want God, we want God." And he tells them, "Be not afraid, be not afraid." Those words of Michael the Archangel, Gabriel the Archangel, to Mary at the Annunciation. Be not afraid. All right, May 13th, 1981. What's May 13th? Feast day of Our Lady of Fatima. When Mary first appeared in Fatima, May 13th, 1917. This guy, Mahmoud Ali Asha, Muslim, has a plan that he's working out with the Bulgarians, communist Bulgarians, and they're going to assassinate the Pope. The communists actually had a plan to kill the Pope. There's one thing for them to call Pope Pius XII, Hitler's Pope, and all this other stuff. This time they're going to put a bullet in him. They're actually going to try to kill a Pope. They drop him off at St. Peter's Square around 9 o'clock in the morning. He's got a 9mm Browning inside of his jacket. Walks around all day. They're planning. He's there with a half a dozen other guys, Bulgarians, planning this attack. He's got a note that he left for himself. Come wearing a cross, concealed as a Christian. Wear tennis shoes for a rapid escape to take off. He's got another guy on the other side of the square, Oral Chelik, who's got a panic bomb. And the minute that Asha fires, Chelik on the other side is going to set off the panic bomb to make a noise to divert attention over there. Complete chaos. The Pope is riding around in his little white Fiat Pope Mobile. drives around St. Peter's Square, goes past the ancient obelisk where St. Peter was martyred, scourged, almost 2,000 years earlier. Drives around, there's no hood, it's an open air, right? Just like JFK, no protection. Comes around, Asha had been waiting all day, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock, when is this gonna happen? 5 o'clock, 5:08, 5:09, 5:10, 5:11, 5:12, 5:13. It's set on the clock. Same date as the calendar, 5:13, May 13th. He comes up around, lifts his gun up in the air. Asha fires, hits the Pope twice. Once in the arm, another in the abdomen, just missing the main abdominal artery by centimeters. He falls into the arms of his closest aide, Father Zivich, who's now a cardinal in Poland, still alive. And he says to him, "Are you hit?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Does it hurt?" He said, "Yes, terribly." Ronald Reagan, who had been shot a few weeks before that, on March 30th, wrote in his diary, "You know, getting shot hurts." So he falls into the arms of Zivich. They speed off to the hospital and get to the hospital just in time, and they saved his life. He had been, Zivich had been told to give him last rites, the anointing of the sick. He said, "It was tearing me up inside, but I did it." And he required a bunch of transfusions, very, very nearly bled to death. As he said, one hand shot the bullet, the other hand deflected. It was just a few centimeters enough away that he didn't bleed to death. All right, so it happens May 13th, 1981, feast day of Our Lady of Fatima. Who can make that up? If you were doing a movie on this, you wouldn't even try. You wouldn't even try to connect this. When these 3 kids, all right, who are they? I had my picture taken with them earlier, right up front here. Lucia, Jacinta, Francisco, right? She had issued these predictions, the end of one war, World War I, and then the start of another, World War II. The communism would spread its evil and errors around the world. And then there was the third secret, which was sealed in a vault, right? They kept this, no one knew what this was. John Paul II, by 1981, he had been Pope for 3 years. He hadn't read it yet. He didn't ask to see it. I mean, if it was me, if I'm Pope, first day, I want to see what that thing says, right? But no, wasn't thinking about it for whatever reason. Hadn't looked at it. Guess had other fish to fry at that point, not really on his mind. It is after this. So he's recovering at Gemelli Clinic in July 1981, and he's thinking, he says to Zivich and others, you know, 2/13 of May. May 13th, 1917, May 13th, 1981, 2/13 of May. Can this be a coincidence? His great quote, "For the Christian, there is no such thing as a coincidence." So he has Cardinal Sepper of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith bring to him the third secret. In the original Portuguese, the Italian translation, and he reads them, and it makes this prediction about the apparent killing of a pope. And he says, this was me. This was it. This applied to me. And as Zivich said, after that, all of his remaining doubts disappeared. He thought that the third secret applied to him. By the way, where did he go 1 year later, the 1 year anniversary, May 13th, 1982? Fatima. And he took the bullet that was in him and he put it in the crown of Our Lady of Fatima. And everybody thought, what's that all about? They didn't divulge what the third secret was for almost 20 years, May 13th of 2000. And who was the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith at that point? Ratzinger, Cardinal Ratzinger. Yeah. I wish I had brought my book with me to get you. I'm sorry, I'm completely out of book. I go through all the stuff in the book, all these different quotes and everything. And the main reason that I did that book, A Pope and a President, was I was finding out stuff because of my history of writing about Ronald Reagan. I got to know Reagan's top aides very, very well. And I learned from Bill Clark, his closest aide, who was a very devout Catholic. I became his biographer. He was like a grandfather to me. That he and Reagan and the others had done this. They did this super secret investigation to try to determine whether or not the Soviets were involved in the shooting of John Paul II. And I don't say who he is in a pope and a president, but I can say it now, God rest his soul, because he died unexpectedly about 3 or 4 years ago. My good friend Herb Meyer, who was the right-hand man to Bill Casey at the CIA. So you had Bill Casey running the CIA, Irish Catholic, Bill Clark running the National Security Council for Reagan, Irish Catholic. Clark, Casey, and Reagan do this super secret report. And I was told by Herb that there were 2 women, one in her 30s, other in 40s, that led the report. And that report is still classified to this day. We're still trying to get it released. But it concluded that the Soviets did it. The Soviets ordered the hit on the Pope. And it was given the go-ahead by the head of the KGB, Yuri Andropov, and it was carried out by the Soviet GRU, the Soviet secret police. So the communists actually tried to kill the Pope. By the way, Andropov of the KGB would have been the boss at the time of a lieutenant colonel in the KGB by the name of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin. But there's no way Putin would have been involved in this. This was the tightest, most secret, nastiest thing they ever did. But Putin definitely knows today what happened. No question about it. So the Soviets did it. All right, communism collapsed in 1989. There's Ronald Reagan at the Berlin Wall in September of that year, when he's no longer president. Met with the Holy Father at the Vatican. And there he is, taking off a chunk to bring home as a souvenir. Last couple slides, and then I'll take any questions that you have. Pope Benedict XVI in Spe Salvi in November 2007 has this great quote that I think really nails it. The communists, they treated communism like their religion. Ronald Reagan used to say, yeah, Marxism, Leninism, that religion of theirs. They treated it like that. And this happens with a lot of these people. It's happening in America right now, in secular America. You purge religion, you take out religion, people are going to fill it with something else. There's a rise in America right now in the number of witches, of all things. People go for some other idea or ideology or whatever to fill what they've purged. But as Benedict said, for them, the New Jerusalem was based on this Marxist classless utopia. But the main mistake of the communists, it was what Jesus told Satan: man does not live on bread alone. They thought if you could solve the economic problem, right, the bread problem, people would find happiness. But as Augustine said, there's a God-shaped vacuum in each of us, not a dollar-shaped vacuum, right? A God-shaped vacuum. You can't deny the spiritual in favor of the strictly material. Man doesn't live by bread alone. Even Pope Francis agrees. The Marxist ideology is wrong. The Marxist ideology is wrong. He said that in December 2013. By the way, it's the only thing he said about it. He hasn't said anything else since. But at least he said that. My last slide here. So this is a good story. This is a righteous battle against evil that the church won in the end of the Cold War. Communism still exists, right? But this is a battle that the church has won. There's a guy in the bottom right there, near the bottom right. Fulton Sheen, our buddy Fulton Sheen. One of my favorite sections of the Catechism, section 409. Take a picture of that quote. The entire, let me read the first one. The whole of man's history, right? The whole of man's history is a story of dour combat between the forces of good and the forces of evil, stretching, as our Lord tells us, from the beginning of history until the very end. John Paul II said this too. Finding himself on the field of battle, man often has to struggle to do what is right, and often at great personal cost to himself. And that's a message from Our Lady of Fatima to everybody in the room. You have to fight evil, and you might get called names on Twitter, right? You might get a petition organized against you. But I'd hate to be standing up there someday in front of the pearly gates, and Jesus says, why did you deny me? He said, well, I didn't want to be called a bigot on Twitter. So, oh, we'll meet Saints Perpetua and Felicity here, right? Here's what they look like in the Colosseum after the lions ripped them to shreds, right? And you didn't want to be called a hater on Twitter. That's pretty pathetic, pretty pathetic. You have to stand up and fight for what's right. And you're going to get called names, but you know what? No matter which position you take, somebody's not going to like it anyway. So you might as well take the right position, right? Follow the church, follow the catechism, follow what Our Lady of Fatima said. All right, I'll stop it there. I'll take any questions that you have. Thank you. Just shout them out. You don't need a mic. Yes, sir, in the back. Yeah. Yeah, the Gorbachev story is really wild. I wrote 2 articles on this right after his death a few months ago, one for National Catholic Register, one for the American Spectator. Mikhail Gorbachev meets his maker. It's a fascinating story. So the name Mikhail is actually a baptismal name given to him, which means Michael, Saint Michael the Archangel. His mom was religious. 3 of his 4 grandparents were religious. His mother would take icons off the wall and a cross and baptize him with it. Both Reagan and John Paul II were fascinated at the thought that Gorbachev, this leader of the Soviet Union, where atheism was a requirement if you were a member of the Communist Party, might be a closet Christian. They were fascinated by it. Gorbachev met with John Paul II at the Vatican, December 1989, and was so nervous he was shaking. Gorbachev was. And John Paul II sort of calmed him down, spoke Russian with him. At the end of the meeting, they went out and they met Raisa, Gorbachev's wife. And Gorbachev said, Raisa, meet Pope John Paul II. He is the moral leader of the world, and he's a Slav, just like us. So they had this sort of common bond. But Gorbachev made all these kind of religious metaphors and allusions with Reagan, with John Paul II. But he was always really quiet about what he believed. And then one day, I think it was around 2005, a British reporter for the Telegraph is walking through Assisi in Italy, the Basilica, the tomb of St. Francis. And he looks down and Mikhail Gorbachev is there on his knees. And he talked to him, he said, excuse me, sir, aren't you Mikhail Gorbachev? And he said, yes, I am. And so what are you doing here? And they said, well, this is where I came to the church. This is where I came to the faith. And he published this story. Mikhail Gorbachev admits he's a Christian. And Mike Reagan and I immediately wrote a piece on it for Christianity Today. And then just like that, Gorbachev issued this press release saying, it is not true, I have not become a Christian. For whatever reason, he wanted to deny it. And then Bill Clark and I worked on it, Clark sent to Gorbachev a translation of the writings of Francis in Russian. He was working on Gorbachev's soul. And we followed this for years. And until the day he died just a few weeks ago, I have never been able to confirm whether or not Gorbachev became a Christian. For whatever reason, it's something he wanted to keep intensely private and didn't want people to know about. Putin's a Christian, not a very good one, but I can say that, right? You invade Ukraine and kill all those people. It's pretty bad. But Boris Yeltsin was a Christian. There'd be no harm in Gorbachev admitting years after the collapse of the evil empire that he had become a Christian. But for whatever reason, he wanted to keep it to himself. Kind of strange. But both Reagan and John Paul II thought it literally providential that the final leader of the Soviet Union would be somebody like Gorbachev, who, as John Paul II put it, was a providential man, even if he didn't understand totally what was going, was being used as a hand of providence for this good end. We today are so lacking leaders like those three. We really are. Reagan, John Paul II, and Gorbachev. This is one of the big problems in the world today is we don't have really great statesmen, stateswomen, Margaret Thatcher, like we did back then. Yes?
Doctor, have you given thought to writing a book about the connection with the Masonic Lodge and communism? The first picture you showed, Karl Marx with his hand in his shirt, clear sign of the Masonic Lodge. We just had a display of the Queen dying last week or a week and a half ago at the funeral, and a lot of us were using Masonic symbology throughout the entire ceremony. It's in the church. You have reasons that it infiltrates the church. The connection, people don't realize communism comes out of the Masonic Lodge. They hate God. They don't even worship God. In fact, most people don't know this at the top. They worship Satan. So maybe give thought to making those two understand this is really a battle that's happening in our own country. We have our own lodges in almost every city in America.
Yeah. There's a friend of mine. Well, I know him from doing the PR for one of the Devil and Karl Marx. He's writing a book. He has an article, you can look it up, called Communism Spawn of Freemasonry. And he's actually doing the research on this. And he's got some pretty good stuff. He really does. And it's ironic, in America, most people just think of the Masons as just this kind of social club, which for a lot of Americans it is. My friend Mark Chodakewicz, who's Polish and grew up, in fact, he was there on June 2nd, 1979. And he says to me, you Americans, you think that, the Masons are like a social club, but to us in Europe, they're evil. Right? Over there, they understand the past and how far back this goes. But in America, they're just like, the lions and the rotary and the elk and the moose. And they're not just like them, but that's what a lot of people think they are. And they don't make the connection at all. But no, I'm not writing that book, but I know someone who is. Yes. Right. Yeah, it's older. It was women. It's like women in their 40s, 50s. Yep, very popular. Yeah, I keep them in the church, keep them in the faith. I think this the vacuum, right? This unclean spirit, it's left this vacuum and it's being filled by these other things, right? Again, Augustine, there's a God-shaped vacuum in all of us. And the communists tried to purge God and fill it with economic materialism based on class, atheism. And these people are filling it with Wicca, paganism. The largest group in America right now among the religious categories that sociologists look at are the nuns, not N-U-N nun, right? But N-O-N-E, people with no religious identification. And which has now passed Catholics as the largest group in America. By the way, if Catholics could have just kept their Catholics over the last 100 years, 75% of the country would probably be Catholic. But I think it's 23, 25%. And so the nuns, I think, are 25, 26. And then after that, there's various Protestant denominations, atheists. But the nuns, the people with no religious affiliation or spiritual training or background or compass or anything, are going to some of these new ideas. And they think it's cute. They think it's fun. They don't see anything bad about it at all. The little town, a couple towns over from where I live, there's a witch store over there. And they my wife will tell me too, look what they're putting up on Facebook. They're having this witches gathering or whatever. And they think it's fun. They think it's cute. If you walked up to them and said something like, this is wicked, you don't want to be a witch, they give you a puzzled look. What are you talking about? Nothing wrong with this. We're just some girls out having some drinks and wearing big spiky black hats. I don't know if they do that or not. But they think it's cool. They think it's fun. They don't get it. I think the best thing that you could give your kids is strong grounding in the faith to keep them away from these silly ideas that then become really dark ideas. And key to doing that, either school them at home or send them to really good Catholic schools and make sure they're good Catholic schools. And then in college, send them to a real, genuine, serious, faithful Catholic college. Because most of them that's where they get burned in college. That's where the takedown of the country has taken place, in the colleges. Be very careful where you send them to school. Yes. But by the way, if I can make one recommendation on that. The Newman Guide, the Newman Center, and National Catholic Register every year releases a list of recommended Catholic colleges. You just Google list of recommended Catholic colleges. Newman, National Catholic Register. There's only about 20 to 30 of them. My student assistant a few years ago at Grove City College left Duquesne in Pittsburgh because she was tired of her faith being assaulted. So she came to Grove City College, which is largely a Protestant college, and was more respected for her faith there. Some of the worst damage is caused at Catholic colleges that were Catholic when you guys went there, but aren't anymore. Yeah. Yeah, great. Yeah, it was amazing. Reagan had this strong interest in the Blessed Mother forever. I think it went back to his father being Catholic. His brother was Catholic. His brother was a daily communicant, as was his sister-in-law. Reagan's ex-wife, Jane Wyman. By the way, Reagan did not want that divorce. He pleaded and begged. He did not want that divorce. Jane Wyman became Jane Wyman was, right? The actress. What movie did she, or what TV show was she on in the 80s? Falcon Crest. Mike Reagan told me this. Mike Reagan was their adopted son. She required in her contract that a priest be allowed on set every day to give her the Eucharist. And then she became a third order Dominican nun. Jane Wyman was buried in the habit, of all things. Reagan knew about Fatima going back to at least the 1940s when he was president of the Screen Actors Guild. That was when the major movie on Fatima was made back then. He was, in 1987, Frank Shakespeare, who's still alive, is 97 years old, briefed Reagan on Fatima for 2 hours on an airplane ride from Venice G7 summit down to Rome, where he was meeting with John Paul II. I said, tell me about it. He said, Reagan was absolutely riveted, fascinated, listening to every word that I said about it. And 2 years before that, May 1985, Reagan gave a speech in Portugal where he talked about the three children of Fatima, about John Paul II visiting there a year after he was shot in May 1982. And this Protestant president said to this audience, there in the prayers of the three children of Fatima is more power than in all the statesmen, presidents, prime ministers, and armies of the world. The president of the United States said that. That was not reported by any newspaper, none of them. I only found it in Reagan's speeches and from Reagan's chief speechwriter, Tony Dolan. But at the end of his life, and this is where a lot of this began for me. So Reagan died June 2004. I was still Protestant. I came into the Catholic Church April 2005. And I'm watching the funeral at the National Cathedral in DC. Bill Clark was there, and Bill had invited me, but I couldn't go because my book, God and Ronald Reagan, just come out. I had like 100 media interviews. I was talking about Reagan's faith. That's what I needed to be doing. And I'm watching on TV, and they start singing Ave Maria. And I asked Bill Clark, I called Bill a couple of hours later, and I said, Bill, Ave Maria. And he said, Paul, I just lost it when that happened. I just lost it. And I said, who chose it? He said, I don't know. Let's find out. And so I called my contacts, the Reagan people. A couple months later, I waited a little bit. And Joanne Drake, who was Nancy Reagan's chief assistant, I had her ask Nancy for me. And Nancy said, Ronnie chose it. Ronnie chose the hymn years before he died. He chose all the Bible verses and everything else. So Ave Maria, he said, yeah, it's one of his favorite hymns, beautiful hymn. So of all things, that's what he picked. But he had this very strong Catholic side. It was surrounded by Catholic advisors, speechwriters, Peggy Noonan, Peter Robinson, wrote the Tear Down This Wall speech, Al Haig, whose brother was a priest. He is surrounded by Catholics. Other questions? I need to stop? All right, go ahead. Yeah, it's fascinating. Right. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, so she's part of a coalition government of 3 different parties. So she herself, I think, probably got about 30 or 40% of the vote. But it's a big deal, and it's a big deal. And of course, they're comparing her to Mussolini and everything else, which is nonsense, just absolute nonsense. But she is, one thing about Italy, though, and I'm actually Italian. My mom's 100% Italian. You never know from my last name. My Ancestry.com thing came up. I'm 55 to 65% Calabrian, so I got enough of the genes. But so I can say this: the Italians are crazy. They've had like 200 governments since like 1947. So I love the Italians, but don't be surprised if she's not in there a year from now. I mean, they change that quickly. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of Americans identify as socialists, especially young people. And Communist Party USA, which was founded in 1919, only has about 5,000 members. They claim they had a membership surge under Trump, which took them up from like 4,500 to 5,000. Okay, but the Democratic Socialists of America, that's the group. They have almost 100,000 members. They refer in their latest thing to their 94,312 comrades, as they call their fellow members. And they've actually elected people to Congress. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the DSA. Ilhan Omar is DSA. Cori Bush is DSA. Rashida Tlaib is DSA. So they're winning seats all over the place. They're about to elect a congresswoman from Pittsburgh. They primary traditional Democrats in Democratic safe districts. So if you got a sort of a moderate Democrat, the DSA candidate challenges them in the primary, defeats them in the primary, then wins easily in November because the Republican's not going to get more than like 20% of the vote. And there are DSA chapters on hundreds of college campuses. And they are true socialists. And a lot of times they use language like comrades and the other language. That's really where the threat is. And a lot of young Americans have said that they would vote for a socialist for president. In fact, Bernie Sanders in 2016 got 13 million votes in the Democratic primary. Hillary Clinton got 17 million. And Trump in the Republican primary got 14 million. So that was a record for Republicans. So Bernie got almost as many votes as Trump. And in 2020, Bernie came in second again, behind only Biden. And Bernie is a lifelong supporter of the Trotskyist Workers' Party, the Socialist Workers' Party. So that's where a lot of the growing movement is in America. And a lot of them want to separate socialism and democratic socialism from communism. And my point, and the church's point, is you can't do that. So we need to educate more and more people about this. Yeah. It's really hard because their colleges are not teaching them these lessons at all. In fact, what you'll find is more of a not even necessarily a pro-communism, but an anti-communism. They don't like the anti-communists. They kind of make fun of the anti-communists. I'll give talks like this at Catholic colleges or secular versions of secular, and the room will be packed with 200-300 students, nowhere to sit, and there are no professors in the room. The professors don't come. And I spoke at a really elite college in Pennsylvania in May. And 2 students came up to me afterwards. I gave a presentation on Marx, what a racist Marx was, what an anti-Semitic Marx was, a horrible, horrible stuff. And 2 students came up to me and said, we had a course on Marxism here, and we didn't learn any of this. And we didn't even have to use the Communist Manifesto for the course. We never even read from it. We didn't read any of this stuff. I said, well, of course, because if you read this stuff, you wouldn't be communists. So they give you this different point of view. So it's a battle to try to educate people properly. That's what it comes down to. And that's a chore. You probably need your laptop back, don't you? You got to go. All right. I think I better stop. All right, one more question. This is it. Who's that? I didn't hear she said.
What Pope Benedict knows about Fatima or the seeker?
Pope Benedict. Well, so he's the one that issued the statement from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, May 13th, 2000. And I've got a big, long chapter on that in the book, which is why I wish I had the book. But he, his interpretation of it, it's theologically very interesting. And he said, doesn't the vision in Fatima show that the Pope dies? Or at least we think he dies. He seems to fall in this volley of gunfire and so forth. And Ratzinger's interpretation was that this means that events are not necessarily fixed. Things can change with the prayers of the faithful and including, as JP2 believed, with the intervening hand of the Blessed Mother or whoever. One hand shot the bullet, another hand guided the bullet. So things do not have to be fixed on this certain course. And that was his interpretation. But it's a very interesting commentary. It's fascinating to read. And I think I better stop. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. I just wanted to thank everybody again. Paul, Kengor, for a great presentation, tremendously helpful. It's just so great. And again, thanks all of you for coming. You have a couple announcements real quick before I just do the final blessing? Or? Oh, raffle ticket. Oh, okay. Let me just give the blessing in case people need. There are some raffle tickets and things. So may Almighty God bless you all, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you so very, very much.
Yeah, our speaker today is Dr. Paul Kengor. He's a professor at Grove City College in Pennsylvania, and he's the author of several books. And if you want to read more of his bio, it's on page 21 in your booklet. So give a warm welcome to Dr. Paul Kengor.
Recording in progress.
Got it. Thank you, Jerry.